According to some non-Jews, how the Jewish Political Action Committee works is a lesson in trickery. This is how the political process is said to work by some non-Jews. Every year, Congress gives Israel at least $3 billion, although the amount has fluctuated to well over $13 billion on more than one occasion. This is money that is often loaned, but never paid back. Jews are allowed dual citizenship, and they have formed well over 300 pro-Israel PACs, which inevitably promote Jewish domestic agendas as well. Some of the billions of dollars that are yearly sent to Israel are thus funneled back to the United States through these Jew PACs, particularly by Jews who have dual citizenship. And this money is then used to garner more support for Israel. Ultimately, this results in both the Republican and Democrat politician trying to see who can better satisfy their Jewish plutocrats and therefore get the Jewish funds. Political candidate Ralph Nader has said on occasion that Washington is an Israeli puppet show.
The Israeli puppeteer travels to Washington. The Israeli puppeteer meets with the puppet in the White House and then moves down Pennsylvania Avenue and meets with the puppets in Congress and then takes back billions of taxpayer dollars.
Nader is not the only one who feels that way. Some Jews feel that non-Jewish politicians are just that, puppets. Here we see a picture of George W. Bush that depicted him as a Jew's own little wooden puppet, for which they pulled the strings. This picture was found in the Australian Jewish News and expresses how many Jews honestly feel about Bush. They joked and told of how they tried to get Bush to play with a dreidel, a toy for little Jewish children. During the 2004 election campaign, President George W. Bush was at AIPAC's headquarters acting like a little sycophant by stating, "For more than 50 years, the United States and Israel have been steadfast allies. AIPAC is one of the reasons why." In fact, it is the only reason why, some argue, when one considers that this organization pulls Bush's strings. Bush then went on to say to the Jewish plutocrats at AIPAC that he would be dictating to the Arab media what they are allowed to say about Jews. He said that anyone in the Arab lands who engages in the demonization of Israel, that is, all Arabs, would thus be targeted for Bush's massive re-education campaign, essentially a propaganda war that suggests Israel can do no wrong. While it is good to stop hatred and violence, it is often argued that Jews want more than this. When politicians dare to question AIPAC's many followers, such politicians are often targeted for defeat. As a result of the strong influence of the AIPAC, both the Democrat and Republican parties go out of their way to ensure that their appointees are Jewish. Some feel that Washington has become almost a Jewish closed shop, except for those people who are elected. President George W. Bush's appointees seem to attest to this, just as President Bill Clinton's did before him. John Kerry, who ran against Bush, claimed to be part Jewish himself. According to political commentator Mr. Alomari, here are just a few of Bush's Jewish appointees. Richard Perle, the chairman of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board. Paul Wolfowitz, Deputy Defense Secretary and member of Perle's Defense Policy Board. Edward Luttwak, member of the National Security Study Group of the Department of Defense at the Pentagon. Henry Kissinger, member of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board. Dov Zakheim, Undersecretary of Defense, Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Defense. Kenneth Adelman, member of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board. I. Lewis Libby, Vice President Dick Cheney's Chief of Staff. Robert Satloff, U.S. National Security Council Advisor. Elliot Abrams, National Security Council Advisor. Mark Grossman, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. Richard Haas, Director of Policy Planning at the State Department and Ambassador at Large. Robert Sulik, U.S. Trade Representative. Ari Fleischer, official White House spokesman for the Bush administration. James Schlesinger, member of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board. David Frum, White House speechwriter. Joshua Bolten, Senior Advisor and Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. David Wormser, Special Assistant to the Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security. Mel Sembler, President of the Export-Import Bank of the United States and Ambassador to Italy. Michael Chertoff, formerly the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, but now a recently appointed federal judge. Steve Goldsmith, another senior advisor to the President and Bush's Jewish domestic policy advisor. Adam Goldman, the White House's special liaison to the Jewish community. It should be pointed out that no other racial or other ethnic group in the United States warrants a special liaison to their community, other than the Jews. Joseph Gildenhorn, Bush's campaign's special liaison to the Jewish community and former ambassador to Switzerland. Christopher Gaston, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Administration for Children and Families at Health and Human Services. Samuel Bodman, the Deputy Secretary of Commerce. Bonnie Cohen, the Undersecretary of State for Management. Ruth Davis, Director of Foreign Service Institute. Daniel Kurtzer, the Ambassador to Israel. Cliff Sobel, Ambassador to the Netherlands. Stuart Bernstein, Ambassador to Denmark. Nancy Brinker, Ambassador to Hungary. Frank Levin, Ambassador to Singapore. Jay Lefkowitz, the Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of the Domestic Policy Council. Ron Weiser, Ambassador to Slovakia. Martin Silverstein, Ambassador to Uruguay. Lincoln Bloomfield, Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. Ken Mailman, the White House Political Director. Douglas Feit, Undersecretary of Defense. Elliot Cohen, member of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board. And Brad Blakeman, the White House Director of Scheduling. While there are more Jewish appointees than this in the Bush's cabinet, it would be impossible to include them all here due to the time involved. Clinton's cabinet was no better. The probable reason for all the Jewish appointments is to make AIPAC and all the other Israel First organizations happy.